Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we are discussing a very common complaint, not only in the comment section of this channel, but shoot, anywhere that you go that covers Warships, the forums, other YouTube channels, Reddit, Facebook groups, MySpace groups, if those still exist, is that the matchmaking in Warships is either unfair, biased, broken in some way, shape, or form, and is commonly the point of blame when discussing the seemingly increase in blowout matches at mid to higher tier in the game. And well, we've talked about the matchmaking before, and Wargaming has even tried to improve upon the matchmaking. Currently, the way matchmaking is supposed to work is that it is supposed to mirror the teams. So if there's, let's say, 4 Iowas in the group that are currently in queue, one team's supposed to have 2 Iowas, other team's supposed to have 2 Iowas, vice versa. Radar cruiser on one side, other side's supposed to have a radar cruiser, although we have seen that this isn't always the case. There's been times when, heck, even on stream, I think last week there was a point where there was, I think, like 4 Georges on one side. The other team didn't have a single Georgia. It's like, well, you divide by 2, but 2 Georgias on one side, 2 Georgias on the other side. Problem solved. And of course, super ships and submarines coming to the game is adding more factors into matchmaking. Other than that, the matchmaking for random battles is essentially random. They don't look at players' stats when considering the teams. It just takes the players that are in queue, puts them on random teams, tries to mirror them as closely as possible, and then you got your teams and it sends them off into the battle. So what I set out to do today is see if I could determine, is this a uniquely World of Warships issue where matchmaking is leading to terrible teams and blowout matches are running rampant, or does this occur in other games as well? So what I did was I went out and played 4 other games. I played each game for 5 rounds, and I kept a tally of how many battles were close, how many matches were blowouts, and we're going to go through them real quick right now and talk about my experiences with those games and how the match was perceived and how they progressed for the 5 matches that I went through in these 4 other games. Now, do keep in mind, too, that most of these games, actually all these games, either have dev teams that are the same size as World of Warships or have much larger dev teams. So, they have more resources, they're ran by larger studios, and yes, most of these games aren't tier-based vehicular combat games. There's honestly not a lot of those out, so it's difficult to get 4 of those together and run through them. So, yes, that is true. But these are games that have been out for some time. These studios have been running many of these franchises for quite some time, so they should have their matchmaker down by now, you'd think. So let's go ahead and take a look at these. Before we begin, though, let's of course define what a blowout match is so we have a solid definition going forward. A blowout match is a match when it's very clear one team's going to win by a very large margin the entire round. So those matches you guys probably have, and we've all experienced these, where the enemy team doesn't lose a single ship, your team is absolutely rolled over, there's like a 600 to 700 points discrepancy for most of the match, and your team basically doesn't have a chance in hell. Now, for these games, I was looking at their win conditions because, of course, not all these games are like World Warships. Many of them have very similar win conditions to World Warships, either reach the points maximum or eliminate the enemy team completely. So we were looking at that category, what you needed to win, the win condition. What I generally went by, and of course it's kind of difficult because as similar as the games are, their win conditions are slightly different, I went for about double. Meaning that if the enemy team either won in half the amount of time that was expected, or they had double the amount of points that they really needed, or there's that big of a discrepancy between the losing team's points and the winning team's points, that's what I went by. So let's say if you needed, 500 points to win the match, if the winning team was at 500 and the losing team was barely at like 220, that would be considered a blowout match. So that's kind of the gist of what I went with when I was going through these games. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get on into it. So yeah, Battlefield 5. This is a game that has a very small community still left playing it. It's definitely not one of the most well-received Battlefields. It had that insane kerfuffle at launch with the cosmetics and some of the, let's say, artistic licenses taken with the game. But it turned out to actually be, in my opinion, one of the better Battlefield games. Not the best, but not the worst. So, one close match, 4 blowouts. We had one match where there's a healthy amount of back and forth between the two teams. We were playing the classic Conquest Battlefield mode where you had to cap the caps, and if the enemy team capped all the caps, of course your team would bleed points faster than the other team would. And of course, you know, you hold the objectives. There's some trading going back and forth. We had one match that was the typical, okay, they've captured half the caps. We were going to circle around, capture some more. We pushed back and managed to have a healthy back and forth. The other 4 matches, oh my god. It was just complete rollovers. The enemy team dominated. They had 70% of the caps for most of the game. My team managed to hold on to 1 or 2 at best. There was 2 games where we just got stuck in our spawn and we weren't able to leave. So, yeah, and that went on for 4 matches. Also worth mentioning, too, for all these games, I did play all of this around the same time on the weekends. So, yeah, pretty hard rollovers there, but it's a relatively small community. Was only 4 servers even going when I went to the server browser to look for the Conquest mode, so very small sample size. There was maybe 500 people playing this game over the weekend when I was playing it, so that's one for the blowouts. Alright, up next is War Thunder, probably the most similar game on this list to Warships. Now, I did play War Thunder Ground. War Thunder Naval isn't really fleshed out yet, and it's kind of a mess with the battle ratings, especially when you're, shoot, you get to like, what is it, 5.7 or 5.3, I think that's the threshold, and then just throws like everything from 5.3 to 7 together, which is like, or 10, whatever, which it's basically you have light cruisers and destroyers and dreadnoughts and battleships fighting each other, and it is War Thunder. So with the way those mechanics work, it's just like with Ground, where if you know where to shoot on the ship, you're going to absolutely just eviscerate that ship in one shot, and Battleships kind of just one-shot everything in that game. So that's complete misery. It's not like a finish mode, so I stuck with Ground. So I also played German 6-7 the entire time. I didn't try and bounce around to any other tiers, just for a nice consistent spell. So, War Thunder, we had one match where it was close, where there's a healthy amount of back and forth, and we had 4 blowout matches. And War Thunder works pretty similarly to Battlefield. There's caps on the map. You have to capture them and hold them. Enemy team, well, not the enemy team, whatever team holds the majority amount of caps, they don't bleed tickets, but the other team does. You have to try and take those away, and you can, of course, hold an even amount of caps each and don't bleed any tickets. So yeah, we had one match that was pretty healthy, back and forth. The other 4 matches were complete rollovers. It was pretty miserable too, getting spawn camped by the enemy team for most of the match sucks. That's a pretty unique War Thunder thing, because War Thunder is one of the only games where the enemy team can shoot and kill you in your spawn from seemingly the other side of the map. So, you know, Snail's got to get his blood there. So there's another one for the blowouts.
Imagine they would kill us in broad daylight, but you never know.
Next up is the game with probably the smallest community that's still active, and that's Red Dead Online. So Red Dead Online, the base game, is free roam, very similar to GTA Online, but there is a series you can play, which is just quick matches, which throws you into a playlist of all these modes that Red Dead Online offers, everything from horse racing to where you have to shoot targets as you're horse racing, to kind of capture the flag game modes. We played a mix of, I forget what it's called, I think it was Plunder, where there's a set amount of objectives that you have to capture in the middle, bring those back to your home base, and there's, I think, 9 bags available worth of, I think it's supposed to be like money or whatever, And once you capture those, you're supposed to hold them at the end of, I think, 10 or 5 minutes. The match ends, and whoever has the most wins at that point. And we played a mixture of that and horse racing. And I know horse racing is not really combat, but you could shoot each other if you wanted to do. But anyway, Red Dead Online. So in this case, we had 3 matches that were close and 2 that were blowouts. So this is very much a case of most of the players that I was playing with were about the same level that I was, but then for 2 matches, these 2 guys showed up that were, God, I don't know, well into the hundreds and somethings in Red Dead Online, which if you played Red Dead Online, getting to 140 something, that takes a hot minute to do. And those guys came in absolutely dominated. They had, for the horse races, they like, I think, the best horse in the game, which takes forever to get, or a nice swipe of your credit card. And they definitely knew what they were doing for the plunder mode as well. But once those guys left, it was a very, very healthy set of matches there. There was a lot of back and forth, especially between the last round of plunder that we had, that had several teams winning all throughout it. It was actually really fun. Some of the most fun I've had in Red Dead Online in, well, ever. Same with the horse races too. Healthy back and forth. Quite a few different players were in the lead throughout the races, so that was quite fun as well. So 3 close, 2 blowouts in Red Dead Online. That was actually pretty surprising to me. I thought it was just going to be all blowouts because you got like those 2 guys that just show up and just dominate the entire time. Now granted, that is on the condition of those very experienced players not being there, but when they aren't there, it's pretty fun.
Bravo 6, going dark.
Okay, next up on the list is one that's very interesting to me, and that is Modern Warfare. So, Modern Warfare actually uses a very light skill-based matchmaking, where it will shove together players with similar KD ratios into one match. So, that was super interesting when I was playing in after the first couple of rounds. So, the first couple of rounds in Modern Warfare, we had 2 rounds that were complete walkovers for me. But then the next 2 rounds were very, very close. Like, we were talking about, we were within 10 to 20 points of each other the entire time. And we were playing Ground War, which is, again, a very similar mode to what I've been doing in the rest of the games. Well, with the exception of Red Dead, because for some reason no one was playing that. Well, probably because no one plays Red Dead Online. But very similar to Battlefield 5. There's different caps you have to go around and cap. But I believe it works a little bit differently in Modern Warfare. I think the caps kind of multiply the points you get when you down enemies or something like that. But whatever, it was basically capture and hold the objectives, domination. And we were very close for these 2 matches. Again, within 10 to 20 points during the entire time. And then we had 1 more blowout after that. So it wound up being 2 close matches, 3 blowout matches. And this is a game with skill-based matchmaking. Now, the first 2 were 2 of the blowouts, but then after that we had 2 that were close, and then at the end 1 blowout again. So if gone for a little bit further, probably would have been a little bit more, even in terms of close matches and blowout matches, but for the sake of the video and the test that we were doing, 5 matches and that was it. So yeah, but those 2 that were close were very, very close. Just want to mention that here as we go through the last one. And then finally we come back to good old World of Warships. I went and played 5 rounds of random battles, and, well, Tier 8 too. I just stuck with Tier 8. I played Odin, Massachusetts, and the Mainz. And we had 2 rounds that were close, then we had 3 blowouts. The 3 blowouts were, well, one was kind of on the borderline of being a blowout, but the enemy team was clearly going to win the entire time. We just managed to hold the flank for a little bit longer than you normally do in a blowout match. So the match didn't end at 10 minutes, it ended in like 15 minutes. But the other 2 blowouts were just complete blowouts. And then we had 2 matches that were close, that were pretty fun. We lost 1, we won 1. So I was pretty happy with those 2 matches. So where does that leave us? Well, if we take a look back, Red Dead Online, 3 close matches, 2 blowouts. Modern Warfare, 2 close matches, 3 blowouts. World of Warships, 2 close matches, 3 blowouts. So it seems to be that in most of these games, the same thing's happening. There seems to be something that's causing these blowout matches to occur across all these games. All these games have vastly different mechanics. Two of them are first-person shooters, one's a third-person shooter, and two of them, War Thunder and World of Warships, or the tier-based vehicular combat games, but the same things happening. And you could break it down, go in depth, and talk about, well, does the matchmaker, if we're talking about Modern Warfare, does it look at your loadouts and does it assign you based on your loadouts, kind of like how World of Warships is supposed to do when you go into the game with your ship. Or you could look at, again, War Thunder, does it do that? It doesn't, by the way. Except for, well, it doesn't even do that anymore, because nation-based matchmaking isn't a thing anymore. In War Thunder, it used to assign you on a team based on what nation you played, but that got done away with, I think, about a year or two ago. You can go through and see, does it do this, does it do that? Or, what I think's happening here is simply, people are people. And there's no way that you can, as a game developer, account for people in your matchmaker. Players are going to play how they are going to play no matter what you do, really. You could make super ships and World Warships, these overpowered ships that are ungodly expensive to play. You could make them ungodly expensive, but if people want to play them, they're still going to play them. You could discourage sniping in Modern Warfare by adding in all these limitations on snipers, or the different types of scopes they could use, or the size of the map. People are still going to snipe. I think that's what's really happening at the end of the day. There's nothing you can really do about it with matchmaking, and we've seen this here. Again, 5 very different games that are leaning toward the same deal when it comes to these blowout matches. Now, with World of Warships, obviously there are things that are being implemented into the game that do discourage or encourage certain types of play styles, like, again, super ships, circling back around to them. Like the Satsuma, it very much encourages camping, and it's very scary for other players to have to try and deal with that, so they tend to be a little bit more cautious. They sit back further, and the same thing was happening in these other games too. When the teams started to lose, players got more passive. They started to sit back, snipe, not leave cover, just camping where they were at. Like in Modern Warfare, when we were being absolutely just stomped on the second match, everyone just was hovering around the B cap, which was the second cap we had, and no one wanted to push forward and try to go around and maybe take it the A cap and see if we could, kind of come from behind and defeat the enemy team that way. No one wanted to do that. So people are people. I think that's what it is at the end of the day. Now, of course, again, there are things that Wargaming's bringing into the game that do encourage certain behaviors, like submarines. Submarines, God forbid you're out by yourself and you get caught by a submarine. You are going to get sunk probably, unless it's a relatively new submarine player, and like CVs too. When the CV rework got released, you started to see more and more of these situations where players bunched up into balls in one corner of the map in order to counteract the CV's planes, because beforehand, a single ship that had good AA could deter a CV strike. You shut down all their planes and, well, that's it. They didn't get regenerative planes back in the day, but when we got those regenerative planes and the mechanics changed, players started to sit together because they wanted to shoot down all the CV's planes. Despite Wargaming saying time and time again that's not really how it's supposed to work anymore. The CV is still supposed to get through and do damage, but it is far less damage than the CVs were doing before in a single strike. But many players just simply refuse that because it's still annoying as hell. What I'm trying to say here is that there's only so much that can be attributed to matchmaking. Sure, there's still some glitches going on. It's supposed to mirror the teams based upon the ship class and type of ship, like radar ship, tanky battleship, secondary battleship, sniping battleship. It's supposed to do that. And if you take a look at your team lined up when you're playing World of Warships, it mostly does that pretty well. There are the odd case here and there where for some reason 4 Georges are on one side and the other team has 4 Jean Bars, when you could split them up, 2 Georges, 2 Jean Bars per side. There's the odd game here and there. Most of the time it really is doing what Wargaming says it's supposed to do. And it really is random matchmaking. It doesn't take a look at your win rate, doesn't take a look at your PR or anything. It just throws a bunch of random players together that have been sitting in queue for a certain amount of time. And yeah, you know, if you're like a tier 8, you've been sitting in queue for like a minute, you have a better chance of getting put into a tier 10 game, so forth and so on. But it's not really matchmaking. It's more of what's being put into the game. Super ships, submarines. These are two radically new classes that have had very little time in the grand scheme of the lifetime of Warships for the community to get comfortable with, understand the mechanics of. I'm still sometimes confused about exactly what's going on with submarines at the moment, and I'm keeping up with it as best as I can, because there's so many darn changes come to submarines every couple of weeks. They tweak something, they change the way this mechanic works, that mechanic works. So the rest of the community, all the average Joes, it's going to take them quite some time to get used to this, and that's one main reason, I think the main reason why the games are like they are at higher tier and mid tier, because there's just so much new stuff coming to the game so fast, and the player base hasn't had time to really. And what happens when you're trying to deal with something that you're not used to or you're not sure about? You're a lot more passive about it, and that's what we're seeing at mid and higher tier. So that's what this has shown me, guys. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comments down below. Try this out for yourself. Just pick 5 of your favorite games, take them for a whirl, record the amount of blowout matches and close matches you have, and see if your fightings are close to mine. And again, let me know about that in the comments down below. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Tuesday. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 40,000 subscribers, and I can't thank you guys enough for that. Hope you'll have a wonderful Tuesday, a wonderful week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.